right, welcome to Friday's weekly wrap-up edition of How China Works.
Today, we have one last topic to get into a little bit, investing in China, plus a few other things to say and share with you.
Yeah, we'll actually start with a few thoughts about how today's show looks a little bit like what next year's shows will be.
It's a preview of the Season 2 format.
Right, we'll explain more in a second. Then we'll get into the topic of investing, which will be a high-level overview, but one that we think gives us a good template for further shows.
We will be revisiting this subject a lot in the next year, and we will add layers to the conversation as we go.
Lastly, we'll touch on highlights of the other shows we've done this week to close things out for the weekend.
So let's do it. Today's show helps us test our format for Season 2 in January. What's different about it?
Well, we've talked about how the ongoing version of the series is going to feature longer shows that are more of a conversation between us about current events, and that we'll be working guests into them wherever we can.
So today we have our first guest. Great, where's she?
Sorry, she's not a she, she's a he. And he's not going to be here with us in person, although sometimes people will do that.
Do what?
Be here and be she's.
Yes, they will. But today, we have a special guest to give us his thoughts on investing here.
He's someone we both know who's been on my other podcast, Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, twice, and he also has his own new podcast over at TechNode called China Tech Investor that he co-hosts with James Hull. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting in handy pre-recorded audio form to give us his thoughts on this topic, Elliot Zagman.
When it comes to investing in China, we need to look at it as somewhere in the middle point between two spectrums. One is between a developed economy and a developing economy. The other is a state-controlled economy and a market economy.
You know, I'm not so sure that intro fit the actual audio.
Okay. What do you think about that explanation?
Well, it's clear and accurate for starters. It illustrates the type of multidimensional analysis that's needed to approach investing here.
Makes sense. Let's hear more.
First, we have to see that it's going from a developing economy to a developed economy. And that means that with a developing economy, that it will grow very quickly, but there will be a lot of risk involved. With a developed economy, there's less risk involved, but it is growing at a much slower pace. With China, it's in the middle, so that it is growing at still a rapid pace, but the rate at which it is growing is slowing over time. But also the positive side of that is that we can probably have more reliability from the investments that we're making. So the companies are becoming more transparent with what they're reporting, and also they're becoming more reliable as companies and as investments.
Elle and others have expanded on this thought elsewhere by pointing out that both the pace and degree of development varies from sector to sector, sometimes widely, other times wildly. So depending on what you're looking to get into, you have to do due diligence that's sector-specific and also figure out how that sector fits into the broader universe here. But wait, there's even more.
And the second area that they're in the middle of is between a market economy and a state-controlled economy. And this is a little bit more complex because whereas when we will evaluate, for example, an American technology company from their ability to profit from their products, with China, you have that as well, but it is not the only factor. You have how it adheres to state mandates and how it complies with state objectives. That is also an important thing. And whether or not that actually makes a profit and brings benefit to shareholders is a very, very complicated thing to look at. So this is an area where we don't have a specific trajectory. When it comes to developing and developed markets, we know that China is going from developing to developed. But we don't know necessarily whether China is going from state-controlled to market-oriented. In the past, that was the case. And now it is, we don't know for sure. So that is a question that investors must think of. And it is, no matter what, we must make sure that whatever they're investing in is aligned with government initiatives and government government programs, government goals, but we don't know exactly how that will move going forward, and that is the big question mark.
What's your big takeaway from that?
It means there's less predictability in many investments here because there are multiple dimensions to consider and you actually can't know all the givens.
That sounds familiar. We talked about this in earlier shows regarding business meetings here.
Right. The same idea applies.
Yes, you have to have someone on your side who is super China smart as an advisor. You can't know all the things you need to know to invest until you have deep knowledge of the country. And that person has to be a real insider in the area in question.
And you made a great point about that when we were talking earlier.
About the differences in dollar versus yuan VC funds and the distinctions between locally or foreign-born GPs and LPs.
That's it. It's maybe a lot to get into all those details, but the broader points are super relevant here. Can you drop a little knowledge on me?
What you mentioned was referencing an ongoing conversation in an entrepreneurial group that I'm in. It's about China blind spots of people who are ethnically Chinese, and not mainlanders. There are so many rapidly changing aspects of day-to-day life living here, such as the sudden popularity of mini programs and how that affects buying habits, or the way real people on the street feel about the clutter and dangers of having so many broken rideshare bikes everywhere, which influences their opinion about those companies. Things like that. All those pieces of being part of a culture are so much more valuable than just thinking you know how to sell to a culture.
It reminds me of something I used to tell China newbies. Translating the language is the easy part, although that's hard. The cultural translations are the real challenge, of course. And nothing against all of our ABC or Sea Turtle friends.
American or other-born Chinese, or Chinese who went away to school but swam home.
But it's usually most effective if your inside guy or gal in China is a locally born and raised person, someone who's steeped in the culture and current with all the things everyone else is immersed in here too.
Of course, someone like me can help be the bridge between those two cultures.
Yeah, that's your brand.
But I have built my career outside of China, so to help a client with a project that requires deep cooperation here, we have to find the right person who's built their career here to work their special magic.
And all of that takes a damn long time, so it's best to ask around and do a lot of homework as you would anyway. But then do twice as much asking as normal. And make sure you're talking to folks who know what they're talking about.
Always a good idea, but especially here.
Okay, so thanks for kickstarting this Chad L. Be sure to check out the China Tech Investor podcast, now available everywhere you get your podcast, including wherever you got this one.
Unless you're listening to this show on our website right now, because they are not there, right?
Right, they are not on HowChinaWorksPodcast.com yet, but we are.
I see what did there.
So did everybody else, but it ain't going to promote itself.
There's also a contact form on the feedback page where you can let us know where you think of this tweak to the format. Most of the rest of Season 1 will be just us, but we'll work a few more guests in where we can.
Hope to hear from you. Moving on?
Yes, let's connect the dots from Monday to today and see how things interconnect.
We told y'all yesterday that we adjusted the topics a little bit as we got into this week. Why'd we do that?
Well, the process of doing the show, posting it, and then hearing back from people about it has been very helpful.
Speaking of moving towards developed from developing, this is a form of live development in a way.
And it's much more of the local style.
I know, we adjust as things change. It's how we do.
So basically, we knew where this week was starting and ending for us, and what was in the middle, so we refigured out the parts in between.
We began with a summary of the historical and cultural values of money here, touching on the olden days through the opening up, and then peeked at the evolutions in the decades since.
One specific cultural value, 孝, also known as
filial piety,
was the main topic on Tuesday.
Yeah, it factors into so many things and has such broad implications that we thought it needed its own show. And it was the longest one this week, actually, by about a minute, so we were right. Dig it when you can.
On Wednesday, we covered and uncovered many of the pros and cons of the move to a cashless society here.
There are a lot of both.
There are. And the biggest danger of that was the focus of yesterday's show,
which was about overconsumption. It's not just the ease of using e-money that's created this problem here.
One that has lots of history in other places.
As we pointed out in fairness. But yeah, there are aspects of it that derive here from a combination of pin-up desires, plus lots of new money meeting savvy marketers ready to extract it by any means necessary.
It's one of the biggest challenges, but there are some encouraging things to say, so we hope you check that show out for sure.
And then today we highlighted the main dimensions to consider with investing here that differ from the West.
Big week. And lots of listen to this weekend if you're just catching up and going backwards through your playlist.
Yeah, maybe set us to go in ascending sequence order if you haven't already to get the most bang for your buck here and to see how things build in theory from show to show.
And to get all the little in-jokes.
Thanks, Yingying. We already did our weekly wrap-up, so what else do we have to say, Yingying?
Let's look ahead at next week.
Great idea. Next week is all about making friends in China and across cultures if you're an actual Chinese person who's moving or going to work with or travel more in the outside world.
On Monday, we'll look at 关系 and how to develop it. Then the rest of the week, we talk about how to make those connections in the first place, from online to real life and in between.
These will be fun shows to dig into, especially with my friend Yingying.
Much appreciated. I'm Yingying Li.
And I'm Brendan Davis. See you next week on How China Works.